It's easy to feel, well, overwhelmed in the security world, right? There's just so much information flying around. New threats, different tools.
Constantly, it never stops.
Exactly. And that's why we do this deep dive, to try and cut through some of that noise, zero in on the really foundational stuff, and get a solid grasp.
And today, we're digging into security governance, the principles, the policies. We've got this great chapter that really lays it all out.
Okay.
It covers the basics like risk management, the CIA triad everyone talks about, but also dives into policies, threat modeling, even supply chain stuff. It's pretty comprehensive.
Right. So the goal isn't just to, read definitions aloud. You want to pull out what's really crucial, make these ideas clear, and hopefully spark some of those aha moments for you listening without the overwhelm.
Hopefully. So the logical place to start, really the bedrock, is the CIA triad. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. These are the core goals.
The CIA. Let's break that down. Confidentiality first. That's basically about keeping secrets,
Right.
Keeping data private.
Pretty much. The source defines it as ensuring secrecy, preventing unauthorized access, keeping things under wraps, essentially.
And how do we do that? The chapter mentions things like encryption.
Yeah, encryption is a big one, scrambling the data. Also, access controls, permissions and logins. And it even mentions steganography.
Oh, that's hiding messages inside other things, like images.
Exactly, hiding in plain sight, almost. But threats aren't always super technical hackers.
Right. I was thinking it could just be someone hitting reply all on the wrong email or leaving a printout behind. Human error seems huge here.
Absolutely huge. We focus on the fancy attacks, but often it's those simple mistakes. That's why countermeasures like encryption and access controls need to be paired with, training. Constant training.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And the chapter links us to concepts like sensitivity, how bad would it be if this leaked, and privacy, especially for personal info.
Then the I in CIA is integrity. This isn't secrecy, it's about trust, right?
Trust. How so?
Trust that the data is accurate and correct, that it hasn't been messed with, basically, protecting its reliability.
So preventing unauthorized changes, but also preventing, accidental corruption.
Exactly. It covers both malicious changes,
Got it. Irrefutable proof. Okay, so C is confidentiality, I is integrity, A is availability. That sounds straightforward. Just making sure stuff works when you need it.
That's the core idea. Timely, uninterrupted access for authorized users, being able to get to your files, your applications, the network.
And the threats here seem pretty broad. Hardware dying, software bugs, DOS attacks.
All of those. Even environmental things like power cuts, or again, human error, someone accidentally unplugging the wrong server.
Oops.
Yeah, oops.
So defenses involve building redundancy, like backup systems.
Redundancy is key. Also good system design, monitoring performance closely, firewalls to block attacks, and yes, good old backups are critical.
And the chapter connects availability to usability too. Like if it's technically online but impossible to use, it's not really available.
Exactly. It needs to be accessible and usable in practice.
Now here's something interesting the chapter brought up. How organizations prioritize C, I, and A differently.
Oh yeah, that's crucial. It's not always CIA in that order of importance.
Like the military might put confidentiality way above everything else. Secrecy is paramount.
Absolutely. Whereas, say, an online store, availability might be king. If the site's down, they're losing money every second.
And it mentioned OT systems, industrial controls, sometimes prioritizing AIC availability first, then integrity, then confidentiality.
Right, keeping the plant running safely is the priority. It really shows security isn't one size fits all. You tailor it to the organization's mission and risks.
Okay, so CIA gives us the goals. What about managing who gets access? The chapter talks about AAA services. I usually think authentication, authorization, accounting. We listed 5.
That's right. It expands on the typical 3. It starts with identification. Simply claiming who you are.
Like typing a username.
Yep, or using a smart card, maybe a fingerprint. It's just the claim, the "Hi, I'm Bob" step, and it's the start of accountability.
Okay, step 1, claim identity. Step 2 must be authentication, proving it.
Exactly. That's where passwords, tokens, biometrics come in again, proving you are Bob. And keeping those proof methods, your password, your token secret, is obviously vital.
Makes sense. Once you're authenticated, then comes authorization. What you're allowed to do.
Precisely. Just because you proved you're Bob doesn't mean you can access the entire system. Authorization defines your permissions, read this file, change that setting, etc. It mentions things like RBAC, role-based access control.
Okay, identify, authenticate, authorize. What are the other two?
Auditing comes next, keeping records, logging who did what, when.
Like a security camera for the digital world?
Good analogy. It tracks actions, changes, logins, everything. Those logs are essential for investigating incidents later.
And the fifth element is accounting or accountability.
Yeah, they often use those terms interchangeably here. It's about reviewing those audit logs, holding people responsible for their actions based on the logged evidence.
And it emphasizes you really need strong authentication for accountability to work. If you're not sure who really logged in, you can't hold them accountable.
Absolutely. It's the foundation. Weak authentication means weak accountability. This all ties into building what they call legally defensible security.
Okay, so CIA for goals, AAA for access control and accountability. Then the chapter gets into the actual protection mechanisms, the tools and techniques.
Right, the practical stuff. And often these mechanisms work together, like layering or defense in depth.
Using multiple controls, like layers of an onion.
Kinda, yeah. Or think about getting into a high security building. You might have a gate, then a guard, then keycard access, then another lock. Multiple hurdles. If one fails, others might still stop an intruder.
No single point of failure.
Makes sense. Better than just one lock on the front door. What else? Abstraction?
Abstraction is about simplifying things by grouping. Instead of setting permissions for every user individually, you group users into roles, like admin or sales, and assign permissions to the role. Much more efficient.
Okay, grouping similar thing.
Right.
Then data hiding. Is that like hiding your password file? Sort of, but it's more about logically separating data so unauthorized people can't easily find or access it. It's different from just security through obscurity, which is hoping nobody finds something just because it's hidden. Data hiding uses actual controls.
Okay. Controlled hiding versus just hoping. And then, of course, encryption.
Can't forget encryption. Scrambling data so it's unreadable without the key. Crucial for data moving across networks or just sitting on a hard drive. And the strength of the encryption matters a lot. Weak encryption is almost useless.
Right. So, shifting gears a bit, the chapter moves into security governance principles. This sounds more high level.
It is. It's about the overall management and direction of security efforts, making sure they line up with the business goals and IT governance. It's not just tech, it's strategy.
And it really emphasizes that security needs to align with the business mission, the objectives. It can't just be its own separate thing in the IT department.
No, it has to be integrated, and that requires a top-down approach. Senior management needs to set the direction, define the main policies.
That commitment from the top seems critical. If the bosses don't care, why should anyone else?
Exactly. Then middle management translates those policies into specific standards and procedures. Operational managers implement them day to day. And then everyone, every employee, has a responsibility to follow the rules.
Contrasting that with a bottom-up approach, where maybe IT tries to implement stuff without that high-level buy-in, sounds like a recipe for failure.
Often is. And it clarifies that security management is ultimately upper management's job, not just IT's. That's why you have roles like the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer.
Right, the CISO. Reporting high up, driving the strategy. It also mentions CSO and ISO as related roles.
But the core message is that senior management needs to show due care taking reasonable steps and due diligence actively maintaining those steps over time. That's essential.
Okay? And governance involves different levels of planning. Strategic, tactical.
Operational, yeah. Strategic is the long-term vision. Tactical is midterm, like specific projects, budgets. Operational is the short-term, day-to-day implementation details. They all need to connect.
Got it. Then we get into some key organizational processes for security, like handling mergers and acquisitions. That sounds risky.
It can be very risky. Bringing systems together, letting people go. There's a lot of potential for data exposure or loss. You need clear processes for things like securely wiping old equipment, asset sanitization, and managing departing employees' access. Exit interviews are important.
Makes sense. Another big one is change control, managing changes to IT systems.
Oh, absolutely critical. Any change, software update, new hardware, configuration tweak can introduce vulnerabilities if not managed properly.
So what does good change control look like? Planning, testing.
Yes. Thorough planning, rigorous testing, logging everything, having rollback plans if things go wrong, notifying users. Often there's a change advisory board, a CAB, that reviews and approves changes.
A formal process.
Okay.
Then there's data classification, sorting data based on how sensitive it is.
Exactly. You can't realistically protect all data with the absolute highest level of security. It's too expensive and impractical. Classification helps you focus resources on what matters most.
What are the benefits? Does it just save money?
It does help allocate resources effectively, but it also shows you're serious about security, identifies your critical assets, helps choose the right controls, meets compliance needs, and defines access levels. It's fundamental.
And there's a whole process for setting it up, like
Yeah.
7 steps.
Yeah, the chapter outlines it. Figure out who's responsible, define the criteria, actually classify and label the data, handle exceptions, pick controls for each level, plan for declassification later, and train everyone on it. That declassification part is important too. Data doesn't always stay sensitive forever.
Right, and it gives examples of classification schemes, like the government military one. Top secret, secret, confidential.
Using that mnemonic U.S. can stop terrorism for the top 3 classified levels, focus heavily on confidentiality.
And then the commercial or private sector one is more like confidential, private, sensitive, public.
Generally, yes. Though confidential and private often overlap in terms of protection needed, private usually implies personal data requiring specific privacy protections.
And alongside classification, there's data ownership, assigning responsibility.
Yep. Who is ultimately responsible for this particular data set? It's usually straightforward in IT, maybe less so for information outside formal systems.
Okay, now the chapter details the different roles and responsibilities. We touched on senior management.
Right. Senior manager or organizational owner. They're ultimately liable, approve policy, need to exercise that due care and diligence.
Then the security professionals, the InfoSec officer, maybe incident response teams.
They're the implementers. They take the policies from management and design and build the solutions. They advise, but senior management decides.
Then the data owner. They classify the data.
Usually, yes. They're responsible for the information asset itself, often a business manager, who then delegates the day-to-day protection.
Okay, the data custodian.
Exactly. The custodian manages the actual controls, backups, patching, implementing security tools, ensuring CIA based on the rules set by the owner and policy, often an IT role.
And then there's the regular user, the end user.
Whose access should be tied to their job least privilege, and who has a responsibility to follow security policies. Don't click weird links.
Ah, yes. And finally, the auditor, the independent check.
Correct. They review everything, verify policies are being followed, check if controls are effective, and report back to senior management. Keeps everyone honest.
It really is a whole ecosystem of roles. Okay, next up, security control frameworks, like blueprints for security.
Sort of. The chapter says planning for security starts with planning to plan. Frameworks give you that structure. It highlights COBIT.
COBIT. Control objectives for information and related technology. Sounds official.
It is. Developed by ISACA, widely used for IT governance and management, including security. It has 5 key principles: meeting stakeholder needs, covering the enterprise end-to-end, using a single framework, taking a holistic approach, and separating governance from management.
Okay, so COBIT is a major one. It lists others too. OSSTMM, ISO 27002, ITIL.
Just mentions them as other examples of standards and guidelines organizations use to build and audit their security programs.
And we loop back briefly to due care and due diligence, acting reasonably and keeping it up.
Exactly. Doing the right thing, due care, and making sure you keep doing it, due diligence. Essential for avoiding negligence claims.
Right. Now, a big section, threat modeling, understanding potential attacks.
Yes, proactively identifying, categorizing, and analyzing potential threats. Ideally done during design, but also useful after deployment.
It mentions Microsoft's SDL security development lifecycle. Secure by design, secure by default.
Secure in deployment and communication, SD3+C. It's a prime example of building security in from the start, a proactive or defensive approach.
Contrasting that with reactive or adversarial approaches, like penetration testing.
Exactly. Pen testing, ethical hacking, code reviews, actively looking for flaws like an attacker would. It also mentions fuzz testing.
Buzz testing.
Basically throwing tons of random malformed data at software to see if it breaks or reveals vulnerabilities.
So how do you identify threats? The chapter mentions focusing on assets, attackers, or the software itself.
Those are 3 common approaches. What are you trying to protect? Who might attack it and why? Or what are the inherent weaknesses in the code?
Then it introduces STRIDE as a way to categorize threats: spoofing, tampering.
Repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. STRIDE. It's a useful checklist. Spoofing is pretending to be someone else. Tampering is changing data. Repudiation is denying an action.
Information disclosure is leaks. Denial of service is preventing access. Elevation of privilege is gaining higher access rights. Got it.
And it applies beyond just software.
It also mentions PASTA and TRIKE.
EVS.
Briefly, yeah. PASTA is a 7-stage risk-focused methodology. Trike focuses on repeatable audits. VAST aims to fit threat modeling into agile development. The main point is there are structured ways to think about threats, because the specific ways people attack change constantly, but the goals like stealing data or crashing a system stay similar.
Exactly. Focus on the potential outcomes. And don't just think about external hackers. Threats can come from insiders too.
Employees, contractors, partners.
Yeah.
You can't assume everyone is trustworthy forever.
Sadly, no. The chapter then talks about diagramming attacks, often using data flow diagrams to see where data moves and where it might be vulnerable.
And breaking the system down.
Yeah.
Reduction analysis.
Yeah, decomposing it, looking at trust boundaries, data paths, input points, where privileged operations happen, understanding the components to find weaknesses.
Once you've found potential threats, you have to prioritize them. Right.
Yeah.
Can't fix everything at once.
Right. You need to rank them. Maybe simple, high, medium, low, or probability times damage potential. It also mentions the DREAD model.
Dread.
Damage potential, reproducibility, exploitability, affected users, discoverability. It's a way to score threats, to figure out which ones need attention first. Then you decide how to respond, fix the code, add a control, change a process.
Okay, makes sense. Last big topic, supply chain risk management. This feels incredibly relevant today.
Hugely relevant. Almost no organization builds everything themselves. We all rely on third-party hardware, software, services.
So a secure supply chain means trusting your vendors.
It means having processes to verify trust, ensuring vendors are reliable, transparent about their practices, and that the components you get haven't been tampered with and counterfeited. It's about the security and integrity of everything you bring into your environment.
So you need to evaluate vendor risks, not just for software, but hardware too, even consultants.
Absolutely. Anything or anyone you rely on that comes from outside. You need ongoing monitoring and assessment too. Maybe your team does it, maybe you hire third-party auditors.
And if you hire auditors, you need to check their security practices too.
Ideally, yes. It's turtles all the way down sometimes.
Huh. So how do you evaluate vendors? Site visits? Paperwork?
All of the above. On-site assessments, reviewing their documents and policies, looking at third-party audit reports. It mentions AICPA SOC reports like SOC1 and SOC2 under SSAE 18. Those are common ways vendors demonstrate their controls.
And you need your own minimum security requirements for anything you buy or contract out, based on your own policies.
Definitely. And you need to scrutinize those service level agreements, the SLAs, to make sure security responsibilities, response times, etc. are clearly defined. Don't just sign the standard contract.
There's a lot to manage there. Okay, phew! That was a lot, but really foundational stuff.
It really covers the landscape of governance. So, to wrap it up, we've hit the core goals with CIA, the access controls with AAA, the importance of policies flowing from the top, threat modeling, and now supply chain security.
Yeah, seeing how they all connect is key. CIA, AAA, policies, threat models, vendor risk, they all work together, or should.
Hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, some solid footing and maybe those aha moments we talked about, whether you're prepping for something specific or just building your knowledge.
Absolutely. So reflecting on all this, especially the interconnectedness and the supply chain aspect, what do you think is the biggest emerging challenge in keeping security governance effective as things get even more complex?
Ooh, that's a great question to chew on. There are definitely some big ones on the horizon.
Something for everyone to think about. And of course, if any specific part of this sparked your interest, definitely dive deeper into the source material or related topics.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this duck dive.